I haven't seen my son in 5 years. And his old high school jacket has been in a box in the attic for 20. So why was it hanging on the hook in my hallway this morning? I stood there longer than I needed to. One hand still holding my coffee, the other resting against the wall like I needed the support. The jacket was brown, faded at the elbows. The zipper still crooked from the time it got caught in a locker door. I knew it the way you know a scar on your own skin. I reached out and touched the sleeve. It was warm. Not sun warm. Not heater warm. Just recently worn. I brought it closer. Pressed my face into the fabric without thinking. It smelled like him. Soap I didn't use. Air from somewhere that wasn't this house. And underneath it all, that familiar note I remembered from when he was a boy rushing past me toward the door. My chest tightened. I checked the front door first. Locked. The deadbolt hadn't moved. Back door next. Still locked. Chain in place. Windows. All of them. Nothing broken. Nothing disturbed. The house hadn't been entered. And yet, there the jacket was. Waiting. My hand shook as I lifted it from the hook. The weight surprised me. It felt heavier than memory. I sat down on the bench by the door. The jacket folded across my lap like something fragile. He was 16 when he got it. Too thin at the shoulders back then. All elbows and impatience. Standing taller every week like he was racing his own childhood. We were in the mall. One of those old ones with bad lighting and better intentions. He stopped in front of the store window and tried not to look too long. I noticed anyway. I told him we were just browsing. That's what I said when money was tight and hope was tighter. But he kept drifting back. Hands in his pockets. Pretending not to care. That jacket cost more than I'd planned to spend that month. It cost 2 overtime shifts. A skipped dentist appointment. And dinners that tasted like apology. When I handed it to him, he didn't say much. He just held it. Then looked at me. Eyes bright but trying not to show it. "I'll wear it every day," he said. And he did. Rain. Heat. Even indoors sometimes. Like it was armor. I remembered how he stood taller in it. How he walked a little slower. Like he wanted the world to see him. I ran my thumb along the frayed cuff now. Same tear. Same stitching I'd fixed one late night at the kitchen table. That jacket hadn't left this house in decades. And yet, this morning, it had found its way home. A sound pulled me out of the memory. Not loud. Just wrong. A soft creak. The kind old houses make all the time. Except this one came from the hallway. I froze. My hand tightened around the jacket. The fabric suddenly heavier in my lap. I listened. The clock in the kitchen kept ticking. The refrigerator hummed like it always did. Everything sounded normal. And that's what unsettled me. I stood up slowly. Every joint announcing itself. And looked toward the hallway. The hook where the jacket hung was still moving. Barely. Just enough to notice. I told myself it was a draft. Old houses breathe, I reminded myself. But the windows were shut. All of them. I walked to the front door. Locked. The deadbolt sat straight, untouched. The back door. The side door. Even the basement entrance. All locked. I checked them twice. Not because I forgot. Because I needed the second look. When I returned to the hallway, the jacket was still there. Quiet. Patient. Like it had always been. I reached out and touched the shoulder again. The smell hadn't faded. That was the part one couldn't explain. Not after 20 years in a box. Not after 5 years without him. Something had changed overnight. And I had the unsettling feeling that the house knew before I did. I sat down slowly in the hallway chair. The one beneath the old family photo. The frame crooked the way I never bothered to fix. I stared at the jacket like it might explain itself. If I waited long enough. It didn't. Instead, a memory came back without asking. The day he wore it home for the first time. He was 16. All elbows and noise and confidence he didn't quite have yet. He stood right there. In this hallway. Turning side to side in front of the mirror. "Looks good, right?" he asked. I told him it did. I didn't tell him how strange it felt to watch him grow taller than me. Back then, the jacket smelled like detergent. And fresh air. And the future. Now it smelled like time. I ran my fingers along the pocket seam. Slow. Careful. The fabric dipped slightly under my touch. That's when I felt it. Something inside. Not heavy. Not large. Just present. My breath caught. I hadn't put anything in that jacket. I was certain of it. I hadn't opened that box in years. I slid my hand into the pocket. My fingers closed around paper. Warm. As if it hadn't been sitting still for long. I pulled it out. And looked down. A movie ticket. From last night. I held the ticket between my fingers. Longer than I needed to. The paper was thin. Creased once down the middle. I didn't recognize the movie title. Didn't recognize the theater either. But the date was clear. Last night. I set the ticket on the small table by the wall. And leaned back in the chair. The house felt different suddenly. Not louder. Not warmer. Just aware. Being a single father teaches you how to listen. You learn the sound of doors. The rhythm of footsteps. The silence that means everything is fine. And the silence that means something is wrong. I learned that skill a long time ago. Back when he was small. Back when the house never stayed quiet for long. I worked nights then. Factory shifts that smelled like oil and metal. I'd come home tired. Hands rough. Shirt stiff with sweat. Dinner was often burned. Sometimes we laughed about it. Sometimes we didn't. He used to sit at the kitchen table. Doing homework. While I stood at the stove pretending I knew what I was doing. I wasn't good at many things. But I showed up. Every day. I always showed up. I looked back at the jacket on the hook. For the first time that morning, I wondered, what if he had, too? The jacket brought back a winter I never talk about. He was 15 then. All elbows and attitude. Trying hard not to need me. Money was tight. Tighter than I ever let him see. I remember standing in that store, holding the jacket in my hands, checking the price tag again and again, like it might change if I stared long enough. It didn't. I bought it anyway. Skipped a few things for myself. Skipped a few meals too, if I'm honest. When I gave it to him, he tried to act casual. Said, "Yeah, it's cool." But later that night, I saw him sleeping on the couch, still wearing it. One arm wrapped around his school bag. That was how we were. We didn't say much, but we stayed. I raised him between shifts and seasons. Baseball games I half-watched, because I was always thinking about the next bill. Parent-teacher meetings, where I felt like I didn't belong. Still, he looked for me in the stands. Every time. A sudden thud came from upstairs. Not loud. Just enough. My heart tightened before my mind caught up. The house settled again. Quiet. I stayed seated, listening, just like I used to. When he left for college, the house didn't feel empty right away. At first, it felt paused, like it was waiting for him to come back, with a bag over his shoulder, and that jacket slung loose behind him. Weeks passed. Then months. The quiet changed. It wasn't patient anymore. It was sharp. I kept cooking for two without thinking. 2 plates. 2 cups. 2 chairs pulled out. I'd catch myself halfway through a sentence, talking to no one. That jacket stayed by the door for years. I told myself it was practical. Easier than folding it away. Truth was, I needed proof he had been here. The day I finally put it in the box, my hands shook. I didn't cry. I just sat on the attic floor. Longer than necessary. Time started moving differently after that. Faster. Sloppier. Years passed like loose pages. Phone calls got shorter. Visits got rarer. Life happened to him. And to me. The last time I saw him, he hugged me a second longer than usual. Said he'd call. I waited. And waited. Another sound from the hallway. This time, fabric. Soft. Distinct. Something brushing against wood. I stood there for a long moment, listening to my own breathing. The jacket hung perfectly still now. Too still. I reached out and touched the sleeve. The fabric was warm. Not sun-warmed. Not attic stale. Warm like it had been worn. My fingers found the cuff, frayed in the same spot he'd worried at during exams. Same place. Same threadbare softness. I lifted the jacket from the hook. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was. The smell reached me then. Soap. Something faintly familiar. Not dust. Not age. Him. My chest tightened without warning. I checked the front door. Locked. Back door. Locked. Windows. All latched. I moved through the house slowly, calling his name once. Only once. No answer. Just the refrigerator hum. And the ticking clock over the sink. I carried the jacket to the table. And laid it flat like something fragile. Something alive. My hand slipped into the right pocket. Out of habit. My fingers touched paper. I held the jacket in my hands longer than I needed to. The weight of it settling into my arms like a memory that refused to stay quiet. The fabric still smelled faintly of him. Not laundry soap, not dust. But something warmer. Familiar. I pressed it closer without thinking. The way I used to when he was small and fell asleep on the couch. His head heavy against my chest. My arm going numb. And me refusing to move. That was when my fingers brushed against something inside the pocket. I stopped breathing. At first, I told myself it was nothing. A scrap of paper. A button. Something left behind 20 years ago and forgotten. But my hand hesitated. I reached inside slowly. As if the jacket itself might object. My fingers closed around thin cardboard. Not soft. Not old. New. I pulled it out and stared. A movie ticket. From last night. The ink was sharp. The edges clean. No yellowing. No fading. The date was clear. Too clear. My heart began to thump, loud enough that I wondered if the house could hear it. I looked down the hallway. Half expecting to see him standing there. Older now, taller than the boy I remembered. But smiling the same way. The hallway was empty. I checked the front door again. Locked. The back door. Locked. Windows. All secure. I stood there holding the ticket. The jacket draped over my arm. And for the first time that morning, fear crept in beside the memories. Not fear of danger. Fear of hope. Because if this meant something, then it meant everything. And I wasn't sure my heart was ready for that again. I sat down at the kitchen table without realizing I'd moved. The chair scraping softly against the floor. The ticket lay between my hands. Small, ordinary. And somehow heavier than the jacket itself. I read it again. And again. Same theater I used to take him to on Friday nights. Back when matinee tickets were cheaper. And popcorn was a once-a-week treat. I remembered how he used to lean over halfway through the movie. And whisper questions he was too excited to keep inside. Did you see that? Why did he do that? Can we come again next week? I used to shush him gently. Pretend to be serious. Then smile in the dark where he couldn't see. A sound came from the hallway. Not loud. Just a shift. A creak. I froze. At my age, you don't jump up quickly. Your body makes suggestions before it obeys. But my heart moved faster than my legs ever could. Hello? I called, my voice thinner than I expected. No answer. The house settled again, as if embarrassed for making noise. I stood slowly, the ticket still in my hand, and walked back toward the hallway. Every step felt deliberate, like the house and I had an understanding now. When I reached the hook, the jacket was still there, exactly where I'd found it, waiting. And that was when I realized something that made my chest tighten. I hadn't put it back. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at the jacket like it might speak first. The hallway light hummed faintly above me. That sound had always bothered my wife. She used to say it felt like the house was thinking. I reached out, slowly, and pressed my face into the fabric. It smelled like old detergent, dust, and something else. Soap I don't buy anymore. My hands trembled, and I told myself it was the cold. That was easier than admitting hope. I checked the doors again. Front door, locked. Back door, bolted. Windows, latched tight. The way I'd kept them since the break-in down the street years ago. No signs of forcing. No signs of carelessness. Just presence. A memory rose without asking permission. Him at 17. Storming into this hallway. Late for school. Half-dressed. That jacket slung over one shoulder. Dad, you see my keys? I'm going to be late. I had lied then. Said I hadn't moved them. Let him panic for 30 seconds too long. I wanted him to slow down. To stay. Now the hallway felt like it was doing the same to me. Holding me there. Asking me not to rush. I slipped my hand into the other pocket. Not expecting anything. Not prepared for what my fingers touched. It was thin. Paper soft. Bent once. Then again. I pulled it out slowly. Like sudden movement might make it disappear. A movie ticket. The ink was fresh enough to shine under the hallway light. Last night's date. A theater downtown I hadn't been to in years. Seat number printed clear as day. I sat down hard on the hallway bench. The wood creaked beneath me. The same way it always had. That sound steadied me. I tried to explain it away. Someone else's jacket. Some strange coincidence. My memory playing tricks. The way people warn you it does when you get old. But the name on the back. His nickname. The one only I ever used. My chest tightened. Not with fear. With something heavier. Regret. I thought of all the calls I never returned fast enough. All the conversations I shortened. Because I didn't want to sound needy. I told myself sons drift. That distance is normal. But this felt intentional. Like someone had stepped into my life quietly. Left proof. And stepped back out again. A sound came from the living room. Soft. Deliberate. Not the house settling. Not the wind. Footsteps. I didn't turn right away. 70 years teaches you patience. But it also teaches you fear wears quieter shoes. The footsteps stopped. The silence after them felt heavier than the sound itself. "Hello?" I said, my voice thinner than I expected. No answer. I stood slowly, knees protesting, hand brushing the wall the way I've done in the dark for decades. The living room light was on. I was certain I'd turned it off. The old armchair faced the window, exactly where it always sat. But something was different. The curtain had been pulled back an inch, just enough to look out. I felt it then. Not fear. Recognition. Someone had been here. Who knew my habits? Who knew where I sat? What I touched? What I left undone? On the side table, next to the lamp, was a mug. Still warm. I hadn't made tea this morning. My hands shook as I reached for it. Chamomile. His favorite. And in that moment, standing in the room where I raised him, I understood something I'd been too proud to admit. He hadn't forgotten me. He had been careful. Careful not to wake the old man, who still checked the locks twice, and slept with memories louder than the night. I sat down slowly, the mug still warm in my hands, the steam curling upward like it knew my face. Chamomile always smelled like evenings, like homework at the kitchen table. Like him asking me questions I didn't always know how to answer. I stared at that mug for a long time. Too long. Because if I let myself think too hard, the fear would turn into something else. Hope. I looked around the room again. This time not searching for danger, but for signs. The cushion on the sofa was pressed in, just slightly, as if someone had sat there, then stood up carefully. The hallway runner was crooked. He used to kick it every time. No matter how many times I straightened it. My chest tightened. Not panic. Recognition again. I whispered his name. Just once. The house didn't answer. But it didn't feel empty anymore. I walked to the hallway, each step slower than the last, and stopped beneath the hook. The jacket wasn't there now, but the air still held its weight, as if it had only just been lifted. I reached out, touching the hook with 2 fingers, like it might still be warm. That's when I heard it. A cough. Soft. Familiar. From somewhere deeper in the house. I didn't jump. That surprised me. The sound didn't carry danger. It carried age. And effort. And something held back for too long. I stood there, hands still hovering near the hook, my heart not racing, just listening. "Hello?" I said. My voice cracked in the middle, like it hadn't been used for this in years. No answer. But the house shifted. Not the way old houses creak. This was quieter. More careful. Someone trying not to be noticed. I took 1 step forward. Then another. Each step brought memories with it. Him learning to walk. Arms out. Laughing when he fell. The hallway felt shorter than it used to. Or maybe I was just older. I passed the mirror. I almost didn't recognize the man looking back. White at the temples. Shoulders curved. Eyes still searching. "I'm not angry," I said. To the air. To the walls. To whoever was listening. That was the truth. I was tired of anger. I reached the doorway to the spare room. The one I never quite turned into anything else. It still smelled faintly of dust. And something familiar. The door was open. Just a crack. And from inside, a breath. Held. Waiting. I stopped at the doorway. Not because I was afraid, but because some moments ask you to stand still and let them arrive on their own. The room hadn't changed much. Same pale walls. Same narrow bed. Same shelf where his trophies used to be. Before he said they didn't matter anymore. The air felt warm. Like someone had been sitting there. For a while. "I don't know why you're here," I said. Softly now. The way I used to speak. When he had nightmares. "But I'm glad you are." The breath shifted. A chair creaked. Just once. And then, "Dad." The word didn't sound like a question. It sounded like something that had been carried a long way, and finally set down. My knees weakened. I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. I had imagined his voice changing. Deeper. Stranger. But it was still his. Still careful. Still trying not to break me. "I didn't know how to knock," he said. I laughed. A small, broken sound. "You never did," I said. And for the first time in years, the house felt full again. He stood there. Not close. Not far. Like he was waiting for instructions. That never came. I noticed the jacket first. Still zipped. Still worn at the cuffs. Still too big for the boy he used to be. And somehow too small for the man in front of me. "You kept it," I said. Not accusing. Just noticing. He nodded. "I kept everything," he said. That one landed heavy. Because I hadn't. I had thrown things away, thinking it would make the house quieter. Instead, it only made it lonelier. He stepped forward. One step. Then stopped. "I didn't disappear," he said. "I just didn't know how to come back." I swallowed. The words I had practiced for years fell apart before they reached my mouth. So I did the only thing I still knew how to do. I opened my arms. For a second, nothing happened. The world held its breath. Then he moved. Slow. Careful. Like he was afraid I might vanish. When he hugged me, his shoulders shook. And mine did too. The jacket pressed between us. And I realized it had never been about the jacket. It had been about finding the courage to hang himself back home. I sit back down at the kitchen table. The chair creaking the way it always has. Like it's clearing its throat before saying something important. The kettle clicks off by itself. Sharp, sudden. And for a moment my heart jumps. The way it used to when he was late coming home from school. I pour the water slowly. Watch the steam rise. Feel the warmth reach my face. And I realize my hands aren't shaking anymore. That surprises me. I look toward the hallway. At the jacket hanging there. Still, patient. As if it has always belonged exactly where it is. I don't rush to it. I don't need to. I breathe in. Then out. Longer this time. The house feels different now. Not fuller. Not louder. Just settled. Like a room after a conversation has finally ended. I think about all the nights I stayed awake. Listening for footsteps that never came. Convincing myself that love meant waiting. Even when waiting hurt. I understand something then. Waiting wasn't empty. It was work. It was every packed lunch. Every late shift. Every quiet dinner. Every apology whispered into the dark. I stand up again. Walk to the hallway. And place my hand on the jacket sleeve. It's warm. Not from memory. From now. I don't say his name out loud. I don't need to. Some things don't require words. Only presence. I turn off the hallway light. Leave the jacket where it is. And head back toward the kitchen. The clock keeps ticking. The house keeps breathing. And for the first time in a long while, I don't feel like I'm waiting anymore. I sit. Sip my tea. And let the quiet stay. Not as loneliness. But as peace. The house feels different now. Not louder, not brighter. Just, occupied again. I stand in the hallway long after the door closes. Long after his footsteps fade down the driveway. The jacket is still there. Hanging on the hook. Exactly where it was this morning. I reach out and straighten it. The way I used to when he was a teenager. Always rushing, always forgetting. Hang it properly. I used to say. Trying to sound stern. Failing every time. I remember teaching him that. Standing right here. His hands too small for the sleeves. His patience thinner than the fabric. The house creaks. A soft settling sound. Like it's exhaling with me. I walk through the rooms slowly. Touching the backs of chairs. The door frames. The quiet corners that held so many versions of us. In the kitchen. I pour 2 cups of tea out of habit. Then stop. I smile at myself. Shake my head. And pour the second one anyway. I carry it to the table. Set it down across from me. And let it sit there. Steaming. Unrushed. Outside. The light softens. Evening leaning gently against the windows. For the first time in years. The house doesn't feel like it's waiting for something. It feels like it remembers. That night. Before bed. I walk back to the hallway one last time. The jacket hangs quietly. No mystery now. No fear. No unanswered questions. Just fabric, memory, and love woven together. I rest my hand on the sleeve. And for a moment, I'm back in every year at once. The tired mornings, the burnt dinners, the late night talks, the years I thought I was failing, when I was really just showing up. I realized something then. Slowly. The way old truths arrive. I was never alone raising him. And I was never forgotten either. Some bonds don't break with distance. They just stretch. Quietly. Patiently. I turn off the hallway light, leaving the jacket in the dark. Exactly where it belongs. Not as a question. Not as a ghost. But as proof. Proof that love knows the way home. Even after 20 years in an attic. Even after 5 years of silence. I head toward my bedroom. My step steady. My heart full in a way it hasn't been in a long time. Tomorrow, the jacket will still be there. And now, so will he.